Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Next Gen Planners podcast. My name is Dan, and I'm the head of community experience here at Next Gen Planners. And today, I am delighted to finally be joined by Karen Malin from the GI Consultant and Naked Compliance. How are you doing today, Karen?
I'm 10 out of 10, thank you, Dan.
10 out of 10. God, that's a confident answer. I would put myself down as a 7 because it's Monday morning here in the UK. Well, it's Monday morning everywhere, is it, I suppose? Well, thank you very much for joining me. I've said finally because, I mean, you've been, along with us on the journey here at Next Gen for pretty much since the beginning. And I can't believe that we've never had you on. We've had 152 podcasts as we record this. We've never had you on. So it was about time that we put a stop to that. So thank you very much for joining me. So for anyone who doesn't know, Karen, she is a compliance consultant. And get this, Karen, the fire behind the GI Consultant and Naked Compliance, which are two awesome businesses in the compliance space. So I'm not going to do an introduction or explain what you do because I would just murder it. So to kick things off, Karen, can you just tell us a little bit about what it is that you get up to on a daily basis?
Well, most people would have it that I spend all day fiddling with a computer, which
sounds weird.
Brilliant for me, but this is basically true. Most of the work I do is done remotely from my little office, which you can see behind me. This is a very efficient way of doing it, and it's very variable work is all I can say. Anyone looking for a career in compliance, it's hilarious, it's exciting, it's good fun, you meet lots of people. What more can I say?
I don't think you need to say anything else, but I don't think we quite expected to hear a compliance a career in compliance described as fun and exciting. I mean, I'm not saying it isn't, but that's probably the first time I've heard someone say that, which is good. And as kind of the feeling that we're going for here today, isn't it, with this podcast, is trying to understand the compliance, whatever it is, whether you work with a compliance consultant, compliance director. I think it's sometimes you say that, what do you say when you introduce yourself? You say, I'm not a bad person. I'm a compliance
consultant. I'm not a bad person, no.
And it's like that kind of disarming, isn't it, before you start? So compliance is, I think you would agree, it's come a long way in the past 20 years. I wasn't here 20 years ago. I mean, I was on the earth, but I wasn't in finance 20 years ago. But it has come a long way. And it's come a long way even in the past, 5 or 6 years that I've been working in finance. But I think it's a big question to start us off, to kind of set the scene. What do you think that the future of compliance in financial planning will look like over the next, let's say another 20 years? What do you think the future will look like?
The short answer is probably very digital. But the more long-winded answer is it really does need to go somewhere, because back in the day, years ago, I was a compliance director and my compliance support just gave me shed loads of work to do, jobs and jobs and jobs on top of jobs that were all completely unproductive and pointless. And it needs to move away from this. And hopefully this is what it will do. It become all the tick boxy stuff will become all digitalized. And then instead of doing tick boxy stuff, compliance conversations can be meaningful. I already find that a meeting is worth 1,000 ticks. So in the background, I can do all the legwork because I can do it really fast and you do it really slowly and mess it up. But the actual real value add is talking about your business and how we can make it better, more profitable and compliant at the same time.
It's kind of a mix of almost like a business consultant and compliance as well, which is good. And I think there's sometimes the kind of we forget, don't we, that compliance is there for a reason. It's there to protect not only the clients, but it's also there to protect the financial planners as well. It's there to protect everyone. So I agree with you that kind of tick box mentality mindset needs to disappear, because then we see compliance as a burden rather than something that helps us. It's like when we talk about this quite often, when people are explaining or presenting their terms of business to clients, and they rush through the bits about FSCS and FOS and things like that, because they think that clients not interested in it. And it's not overly interesting, but it is a huge benefit to the clients. You can say, you've got this fantastic protection when you're working with me that if anything goes wrong, you know that you're going to be covered to an extent by the FSCS and the FOS. And that should take away any of the risks that you have before working with me. But we just don't frame it in that way, do we? We rush by it and like treat it as it's a tick box thing. Yeah, I've told them about that, therefore I can move on now and talk about the exciting stuff. Whereas in reality, you probably can make that exciting as well. It's just about the language that we use. I went a bit wax lyrical there. Sorry, this is supposed to be the guest, aren't you, Karen? Not me.
You're doing a great job. Do you want to come and work for me, boy?
Boy. So as I kind of mentioned there, the relationships between compliance departments, compliance consultants and directors and all sorts of stuff and financial planners can sometimes become quite frayed. There's various different reasons for that, like whether they don't like being told to do something or whether, they feel like they're blocking progress or whatever it is. I should mention, by the way, for the audience that when I used to work at a financial planning firm, you were our compliance consultant. And I'm not just saying this, but I never felt like you were blocking our progress. But I know that some people do have that mindset with their compliance consultants. So from your perspective, what tips would you have for financial planners on working with their compliance guys?
Well, you could keep them as far away as possible. If you can't do that, then take them out for a beer. Lots of beers. Bit of nice red wine as well goes down. As with most conflicted relationships, the key is to get to know each other, communicate, understand each other. So whatever your compliance department is like, they're going to be better if they understand your point of view, maybe even walk in your shoes. Potentially, it should be a qualification to be a compliance person that you have actually had to sell products in the past so that you know the pressures that people are under. And I think understanding is key. So yeah, talk to your compliance guys, socialize with them, get to know them, discuss things with them.
I think that's a good idea. I also, you always, like I said, you always say this, but you are a person, you're a human being. Like you're not just someone there who ticks boxes and tells you off every now and again. But I don't actually know how many people in the audience will actually or have in the past actually got to know their compliance consultant or compliance director, and it could make a massive amount of difference. Good tip. So how long has it you've been working in? I mean, this might be a bit of a rude question, but how long is it that you've been working in compliance now, Karen?
Actually, just compliance since probably about 15 years.
Okay.
It's so long ago, I can't remember. Before that, I was a compliance director, which was even more boring in some people's books because you have to do that in the evenings after you've been working all day, basically.
Yeah. So, I mean, but you've been working in compliance for long enough to see some hilarious things. In fact, I know that you have seen some things, for instance, in suitability reports that you remember and that you bring up every now and again saying you shouldn't do this. But what are some like really, really simple things that financial planners get wrong when it comes to compliance that you think they could put right today, like easily?
Well, sometimes it's actually doing what compliance people say. They take that as gospel, don't question it, and do some absolutely nutsy things like put in a suitability report, dear client, you are 55 years old and married to Lucy. If the client does not know how old he is and who he's married to, then I think he probably needs to be operating under a power of attorney. So there's stuff like that. But at the other end of it, there's not doing what your compliance people say. Lost track of the number of times this is whatever you do, don't do that. Or make sure you don't do a compromise agreement. Send somebody a proper reference. If you're sacking them, sack them. Don't gloss over it, blah, blah, blah. Don't do it. Get told off by the FCA. What can you say? So listening to your compliance people is also good. My key bugbear with files and compliance is that people don't make notes. And I do completely understand this. They know their client super well, but all of the information is in here and it's not written down. So you get run over by a bus. Nobody's got a Scooby-Doo why you did stuff. You need notes and more notes on your notes. You know how fact finds have all those spaces in them, usually headed notes about this, notes about that. It'd be really useful if you fill them in instead of putting those notes in your suitability report, which probably adds another 25 pages to the wretched thing. So suitability reports were probably designed by a compliance person who only wanted to read one document. So you throw the kitchen sink into this document. It's, apart from compliance, it's completely valueless. And that seems to be what's happening. What I like to see is the report, instead of being treated as an evil necessity, that the report is actually the product and it's something of value to the client. So forget your enemies or buddies in compliance, whatever they may be. Let's have a report that, yeah, it needs to meet the rules, but the rules are tiny. They're not 100 pages of rules. Meet the rules, but make it entertaining and useful for the client. Forget about the compliance bods. They can read the notes that you've put in your fact find and your research. If you do that, that is my main thing, notes.
I thought you might say that because you've told us off for doing that before.
That's so predictable, I know.
I think I've heard notes be described as lots of different things, but I think the one that stuck with me was like the context behind the story. You know, when you're trying to write a suitability report, if you're writing objectives for a client, we know that like things like starter pension and stuff like that are not very good objectives. Like there, I mean, they can be, but that's not really what the client wants from you. And to learn what the client wants from you, you need to go to notes and you need to read their story effectively, which is what good meeting notes and telephone notes and things like that can do as well. How do people get into the habit of making good notes? And because, you know, the old fashioned way of writing on an A4 lined pad, we know that doesn't work because they just get lost in drawers. They just get lost in, you know, bags and all sorts of stuff. What do you use when you're making notes, and how do you keep on track of them?
I now have vision, Dan, of you with a little handbag like Margaret Thatcher, full of notes. Well, I think some of the easier ways to do it is you're all going to shove this stuff onto a computer one way or another, whether it's in Teleflow back office system or you're using other CRM software. They usually have notes functionality. So use it, work out how it works, work out how the notes works and use it. I've seen this used to good effect. For example, on IO, there's a notes field that you can have as a ticker at the left-hand side of the screen. And if you always update that with what's going on, super easy for people to see. The other area is your fact find. It's full of note spaces, stick them in there. Or you can record things. You can use software to transcribe those recordings. There's now a piece of kit that you can attach to Zoom, which will transcribe your Zoom meeting. So save you recording it, listening to it, or shoving it through Otter AI. You can actually just have some software do it live. So you've automatically got meeting notes. There's really no excuse for not doing notes about the meetings. And then when you do your research, usually what happens is the advisor knows exactly what he's going to sell the client. And so the research is just like a backfilling exercise. This is not how it should go. There should be a recorded thought process, like this client needs XXX. So I'm selecting this type of wrapper over that type of wrapper because. So you can do about 6 bullet points to summarize your research and then shove all your TrustNet printouts to back that up. So that's how I do notes. You can get an iPad that you can write on with a pencil, and then the notes are automatically electronic. You can attach them to stuff, copy them, turn them into PDFs. The world's your oyster when it comes to notes.
Yeah, I think it's just about finding what, I mean, there's also things like Remarkable and all that kind of stuff where you can make notes on your iPad. And there's loads of different avenues for doing it. It's about what works for you. Personally, I quite like the idea of recording, you know, with like a voice note on your phone or something like that. I think that would be a good way to do it. And then, like you said, putting it into Otter AI, and then you've had to do no manual work, which is pretty cool. Okay, message received and understood on the notes. Now, compliance is continuously moving. Some people say that's a bad thing about it. It's developing and things like that. But what developments are you seeing that are coming into compliance that you think our audience should be aware of at the moment?
If I'm honest, I think it's going completely out of hand at the moment. There's so many consultations, so many demands, so many surveys, policy statements. It's like a continuous rolling wave, and sorting out what matters and what doesn't from this is really difficult. The upshot is we've got things like the consumer duty, which is basically more TCF, only with more punch, more force. And it's just going to mean take more notes, get more evidence. If it hasn't been written down, it's not happened. The regulator is going to spend less time actually talking to people, seeing them and having meetings and explaining itself, and more time doing surveys and making you repeat information that they already know. We're just seeing a huge regulatory burden on firms, and a lot of it is basically same old over again. It's a repeat, it's a duplication, and it's a bit of a waste of time. And I'm not sure if they even do anything with it. For firms, the key thing is the outcomes of their customers should be demonstrable. So I think the best thing that firms can do, and this is good for them as well, is actually articulate what outcomes their clients have had, what good they've done. And we all hear stories and anecdotes of my client's done this, it's amazing, he's bought his camper van, he's in Hungary now, he's having an amazing time. Let's have these things written down, because these things will become important. And they're also good for business. If you can articulate the benefits you have bestowed upon your clients, then what better marketing tool? Good for focusing everyone. So when you're reviewing the client, look at what they've achieved through their interaction with you and write it down in a note somewhere, somehow.
Good. I like that idea. Yeah, it's like killing. I don't know if you can say that phrase anymore, but how do they say it now? It's feeding two birds with one stone.
It's killing two birds with one stone, actually, Dan, which is potentially not really what we're looking for.
That's why I didn't say it, is because I'm gonna get I'll get told off by Peter for that. So that's why I went with their alternative, which is feeding two birds with one stone. But never mind.
I like thinking.
Yeah. So, okay, good. Yeah, good. And one area included in that kind of continuously developing area is, and we talk about a lot, is suitability reports. That is, we've spoke about it already today, and what is actually needed in these, because I still, come across people who are writing like 70, 80 page suitability, maybe not to that extent, but you know what I mean, very, very long suitability reports. And then there's people on the other end of the scale who are, producing really, really short ones. I don't really know which one's best, to be honest, but what would you say? What do you think that a modern suitability report should look like and should contain? What should it have in it?
Well, the report is like the manifestation of the product and service. So I think it's probably important that it's looking quite good. It depends what the report is for. For example, the first report that you do for a client, it is going to be long, but I think sometimes they're wrong with the wrong stuff. It would be nice if it includes all the cash flow scenarios that you've done, so that when you're talking about the client's objectives, like the client saying, I want to be okay if my wife dies, for example, you can actually visualize all these through the forecasting and actually bring to life the client's objectives, the secure retirement that they want, the traveling around Europe and whether they can afford to do this and have kids, send them to university, etc. So I think the objectives section, especially in the first report, instead of glossing over it with bullet points saying you want this, that, and the other, bring that to life, actually totally articulate that. And whether you do a PowerPoint over Zoom, you make a cartoon out of it, or you do a live presentation, whatever you've done, you'll be able to turn it into a PDF and a permanent record. And also, when we go on to the recommendations of the first report, we do need to articulate the risks and why they need to be taken. We're now looking once more at a time with inflation, which hasn't happened for ages. So we can really show clients what inflation has done in the past, and they can actually see what it's doing now, and which is a pressing reason to take investment risk. So I think the report, the first one particularly, should be used to really showcase the 4 things that need to be in it, which is objectives, how the solution meets those objectives, and the downsides, risk and cost. So those things are the key things. There's a few other technical bits of nonsense, like Rule 64 on stakeholder. Let's have these in the appendices. Even the FCA know that was a complete waste of time. Stakeholder was one of the big flops of history, one of the many, and yet there's still a rule about it, which is nuts. More serious is a discussion about the workplace pension scheme, which is a worthwhile rule that says you have to consider this. So especially when you've got younger people with jobs rather than being company directors, yes, we do have to explore this, and you do have to explain why you're not using it or you are using it. And I guess the sooner the advice profession realizes what's important in the report, the better. It's not good for me as a compliance person. It's super nice having it all in one place. But from a client's perspective, all that stuff about them, that's for the notes. That's a fact find. And then when we come to review, the rules allow for you to count that first report as part of the review information. You don't have to repeat it all. So review reports definitely should not be long. Review reports can be very short, but again, it depends on what's going on with the client. You will do horses for courses, which is where templates can go badly wrong. Giving everyone the same template is what got all those British Steel pension transfer specialists in trouble. Do not template it. Don't expect to template it. Have massive areas of personalization. That is how to present a suitability report.
It takes a little bit longer, but it protects you in the long run, and it's also better for the clients as well, which is
maybe it takes longer, maybe it doesn't, maybe it's more fun to do.
Yeah,
I'd much rather make an iMovie than write a report. What if I did my reports in iMovie? Another 2 birds with 1 stone, or feeding them scones out of Margaret Thatcher's handbag, which is what I'm seeing now, Dan.
That's actually, I was going to ask you that question next, which is, we see them as, some people see them as like boring regulatory tick box documents, Word documents that don't have any life into them and take 10 minutes to present because they're so dull and boring. But like you said there, you can actually present them in like creative and innovative ways that the client will find interesting. You mentioned that one there, iMovie. Have you seen like cool ways of people presenting reports to their clients?
Oh, primarily the coolest way has been doing a presentation over Zoom, to be honest, or actually doing that in person. You see, what most advisors do and are good at is they do go and present it to the clients, whether it's on a video call or in person. They actually present what they're going to recommend to the client quite articulately, highlight the benefits, show them how it all works, talk it through with them. And then the report comes along and it bears no resemblance to this presentation, conversation, or whatever. So why not have the report match it? So, for example, if you use some software to write your reports, that could be the appendix. The actual report should be in front of that, and it should be this lively presentation of, you want this, I'm going to give you that, which will give you the other.
Yeah. It comes down, I think a part of this as well comes down to the FCA's durable medium wording.
A PDF is a durable medium, though. Everything can be converted to a PDF document. It's not a barrier. Indeed, if you ever listen to the FCA guys, and they've been at this for years, Rory Percival did it, Mark Gould does it now. They do presentations on what should be in a suitability report, and they do not say you want a 100-page edifice full of risk warnings. That's not what they're saying at all.
I guess what I meant by durable medium was things like video, and was things, like that kind of stuff. Do they consider that video? Do they still not consider video as a durable medium? Is kind of what I'm asking.
They might do if you can download it. They haven't actually commented on that. I think from a purely sensible point of view, a video is quite time consuming to watch, whereas a PDF document, you can scan through it. So if your client's not blind, the document is a quicker read, and I think they do need a record of those 4 things that have to be in the suitability report. But there's no reason why they can't be presented in a video to them first time. But no, I don't think they would count a video as a durable medium, although a downloadable video, one that they can store on their computer, is durable. It's as durable as a piece of paper, less likely to be chewed up by the dog, etc., etc. So I think regulation does need to catch up with the digital age, because another crazy thing is all these global restrictions about which countries you can advise people in. There are no borders on the internet, so it needs to get with the program.
Yeah, I guess what I was meaning with that was, I think it's more, I think video can be a communication of the report. So, the report could still be done in a durable medium, as in like whatever, Word, PDF, whatever it is that you guys want to use, but then communicating it to the client is where you can really start to get creative and innovative. And like you said, that's the part that planners are good at and enjoy.
A video is a lovely idea. Ideally, you then need some interactive Q&A afterwards. But I think the Zoom revolution, all this video conferencing, FaceTime, WhatsApp, visuals, all of this has really meant that there's no excuse for posting something to the client, which is going to cost you nearly £1 at least now. There's no excuse for doing that. They read it, misunderstand it, then you're batting to and from with phone calls. You make an appointment, you spend half an hour on a call like this, and you can iron all that out. And I think that has revolutionized things. There's very low cost associated with doing that. You're not harming the environment with your diesel output. It's a plan, and there's no excuse for not doing that, really.
Yeah, I think I'm letting my creative brain get away with itself here a little bit, but there's a fantastic tool which I talk about quite a lot, which is called Video Ask. And it's effectively what it is. It's like a storytelling tool that gives the audience a chance to kind of like make their choice about where they want to go. So in a way, I'm thinking, and this is just on the spot here, I'm thinking, if you could have a suitability report video ask, you could have all of the different sections of the suitability report, at which the clients could choose which section they want to go on to next. So let's say if you wanted to talk about objectives, they can click on objectives, and then it's a 2-minute video of you explaining why those objectives are suitable. Now, of course, that's not a durable medium, and it's going to take a little bit extra to communicate this to the clients, and it's going to take a little bit more time to produce. But from the client's perspective, they've never seen anything like that before. It would be awesome if you could do that rather than just giving them a Word document and saying, here, sign this, will you please, on DocuSign. I mean, I know that nobody really does that, but that's sometimes how it feels.
You can do that. There's absolutely no reason why you can't do that. You can get their instructions over video as well. You just need to back it up with the durable medium thing. Yeah,
okay, that makes sense. You mentioned there in that last thing that you mentioned about the BSPS, or British Steel Pension Scheme, I don't know how, debacle, that's how I will describe it. And this is kind of brought on a whole new culture into financial services, which is called, or you call it, compensation culture. I think some other people do as well, where because of those things, there's like stricter regulation, more stuff being brought in. And that means that sometimes financial planners are having to pay compensation for mistakes that were made years ago with their clients. Sometimes we're even talking decades. So what tips do you have for the audience who are listening to this, who the majority of them will be financial planners, to ensure that they don't fall victim to the compensation culture of the future? And I'm going to give you a rule that notes can't be in your answer, because I know that you're going to say notes, aren't you?
I don't know what you mean. Well, first base is obviously don't buy a business with a dodgy history. If you are wanting to purchase a firm or its clients, an asset purchase is much safer because you don't buy the liabilities. for looking after your own business going forward, that might be squeaky clean, is just keep it clean. Do the stuff for your clients. Don't do any things that you wouldn't recommend your granny do. Stay away from crazy unregulated parking spaces and other such products. They're really not needed. Think very carefully about other high-risk products. Any products where the client could lose everything. Is there really any need to do that? Is it worth it to avoid paying tax, or is it better to actually just pay some tax? If none of us pay any tax, we will be living in an awful environment. Tax is needed. We need police, we need a government, we need all kinds of infrastructure. If we pay no tax, which would be nice, we would live in a case of anarchy. So tax is not that bad. And finally, whatever you do, don't throw anything away. Don't quote the Data Protection Act saying you're not keeping it longer than necessary. Keep it forever because it might be necessary.
Interesting. I think, I would like to think, and I would hope that no one in the audience and none of the people in our audience here at NextGen would recommend those kind of dodgy, unregulated schemes to avoid tax and things like that. Obviously, I don't know everyone in the audience, but I would hope that they wouldn't. I think what I was meaning more by that kind of question was really just, because sometimes it's the little things that can trip people up. So it's the tiny little things that they forgot to mention in the client's objectives or things like that can trip them up years down the line and mean they have to pay some kind of compensation to the clients. Without it getting to a point where we have to get like file checked for every single client that we have, what kind of things can you put in place to make sure that you like those kind of tiny little mistakes are weed that we're always going to make mistakes, aren't we? But how do we?
I don't honestly think that these huge mis-selling carry-ons are due to tiny mistakes. No. They're more due to the zeitgeist, the times. So the word endowment is now a dirty word. Nobody will buy an endowment ever again, while ever it's called an endowment. But they will buy the Proof Fund, which is a with profits arrangement. So they've changed the names of some things, lest we forget. But endowments, when they started, they enabled people to buy houses who would not have been able to otherwise afford the house. So they basically made the mortgage cheaper. You bought an interest-only mortgage and an endowment policy, which became things like low-cost, low-start endowment policies. These oiked people onto the property ladder, and they made a killing when they sold their properties because property went banana. 3, 4, 5-fold increases in value over 10 years, no problem. So unfortunately, this outlived its usefulness and people got greedy and it all went south because people were sold endowments and interest-only mortgages without understanding. Excuse me. And so they didn't understand the implications, like they needed to sell the house maybe to pay off a shortfall in the mortgage because the endowment hadn't performed because not enough money was going into it. And this resulted in a lot of people claiming compensation who really weren't entitled to it because they did it with knowing what it was, but also by the same token, a load of people who should never have been sold this. So it was just a huge bonanza. And the commissions that were paid on endowments, the endowment invested nothing for years because of the commission paid to the advisor. Looking at the product, you could see that there were flaws in it. And the whole commission thing and the way products were sold, it all stank. You could see it. And I don't think that's going to happen again. Commissions being banned. People who are not trying to flog ridiculous, unregulated investments, they should not be able to make any mistakes that would lead to this. I think that the Woodford is probably the nearest thing that's happened recently. But let's face it, that's also down to due diligence, not necessarily on the part of individual advisors, but this guy did behave like the Wolf of Wall Street. And I think for a lot of advisors, that was, we don't want to know him. And all of this was public information that you could find out. So I think just taking reasonable steps to do your due diligence, be careful. I don't think anybody's going to make these kind of mistakes again, although I might be shot down for saying that.
Yeah, it was. Said that 10 years ago. I think it's almost like starting from a very conservative mind, with a very conservative mindset, rather than perhaps a progressive one, and thinking what like you said before, don't do anything that you wouldn't say to your grandma or say to your mum or anything like that. I say
maybe
mum, by the way.
Crypto's going to be the next nightmare to befall us.
It could be.
But it would be nice to think that the new SME advisors that are rising up now, I would say like phoenixes, but they're not phoenixes, like non-phoenixes. If they can be supported by the Financial Conduct Authority and their regulatory burden is not too stupid, these people are doing actual holistic financial planning rather than flogging products. And I think that having been taken away, this product flogging scenario, it makes a whole different scenario. We're over the defined benefit pension things, which at one point the FCA was leaning towards, well, maybe they are a good idea, encouraged by the government who wanted people to spend money. That's all been reversed. We can all see where that's gone. So there's not really a lot left to mess up, is there?
We'll see in a few years' time.
Yes, we will. We'll revisit this and regret everything.
Yeah, we'll do a second episode in a few years' time and see what's going on. Speaking of the future then, so I kind of asked you this question before related to compliance, but this is a question that we ask everyone because it gets some good answers. What do you think that the future of financial planning as a profession will look like in let's just say 20 years' time? What do you think it'll look like?
I think it'll be a very different tea party. I think it will be much, much more professional, so long as it doesn't get stifled by regulatory claptrap, to be honest. I think we'll see more alternatives, your likes of Vanguard and Nutmeg, where people can self-serve because they need to start with, because they can't afford a planner. But we'll also see financial coaching, I think, rise up as a thing that people have heard of. And then more holistic planning, and it will be more about the planning than the products at the end of it.
It's good. It's an optimistic view. I agree. And if you think about, again, we're talking to you guys in the audience here, that I know that many people who listen to this are those holistic financial planners already. So, I mean, keep doing it. Sounds like a really cop-out thing, doesn't it? But almost like keep doing what you're doing.
And my fear is that we've got so many consolidators and so many firms operating in the old way, if you like, that are talking about funds under management, get more funds under management, more funds under management, and going like that. But these guys are going to grow old and disappear and retire. So I think that if the younger generation can hang in there, this can be turned around, because there must be young advisors in these large firms.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Right, let's start to close things down a little bit. So we always like to ask all of our guests for a book or a piece of content or a film or anything that has helped them in their career and get them to where they are today. What would you say? What would you recommend to people?
I want to say something deep and meaningful and revolutionary, but I have to say that the most useful book that I have ever read was a guy who brought together various productivity ideas, and it's called How to Be a Productivity Ninja by Graham Alcott. And that has been a bit of a Bible. I haven't necessarily followed everything to the letter, but all of the concepts behind it, they all completely make sense. And I don't think I'd be able to be as productive without those methods. It would be impossible. I'd forget things.
That's good. We've found the key to your success. That's it, isn't it? That's never been recommended on our show before as well. So that's good. I can't actually say I've ever heard of that book before, but we'll certainly give it a try. So anyone in the audience, there you go. You've got a new New book to add to your list. Well, thank you so much, Karen. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you today, as always. It's been a bit weird for us too, because we usually chat, not being recorded. But it's been a good. We've really talked about some things that we wouldn't normally talk about, so it's been good fun. What we like to do on the show is give last word to the person who's come on to say a big thank you for coming on the show. So, can you tell us where to connect with you, where to find you, and you must have some kind of motivational quote or something for the audience. So, tell us how we can connect with you, where we can find you, and leave us with a bit of motivation.
Oh dear, can I give negatives like don't Facebook me and don't WhatsApp me? Please don't try and contact me on LinkedIn. My email address is fairly famous and self-explanatory, and on my website there's a contact form which emails me and a phone number which emails me. I live on my inbox because I run an email support service. Really, I would say to you guys, don't give up on compliance. It's actually really better known as risk management. It's managing the risk in your business and making everything better. So roll with it. Be nice to people like me. We're honestly on your side.
Yeah. Fantastic. Be nice to your compliance consultants. That's today's takeaway message, isn't it? Well, thank you so much. That was brilliant. So that was Karen Malin from the GI Consultant and Naked Compliance on the Next Gen Planners podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can share it on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And it's available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and our website, which is nextgenplanners.co.uk. And on there, you'll find more information about the Next Gen Planners training contract, the Future Leaders program, the Blast Off program, Advice Stack, our amazing community, which now has over 700 fantastic financial service heroes in there. And of course, our conference, which is coming up in May and June this year, the Next Gen Planners Mega Conference, and we'll have speakers from all around the world and some keynote speakers and loads of fun as well. I think Karen's going to be there. Are you going to be there, Karen?
I think I am, yes.
There we go. That's even more reason to turn up then, isn't it? And if you could leave this episode a review and the Next Gen Planners podcast a review, that really, really does help us. I think we've got about 40 reviews now. So if we could really start to ramp those up a little bit, that you have no idea how much that does help us. So if you could leave us a review, that would be absolutely awesome. But again, thank you so much to Karen for joining us on today's show. Thank you guys at home for listening as always. And we will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.